true battle is not against flesh and blood, but in our hearts.
So I think you're a very key person in helping this film come together. We're going to find out a bit about that. Hi, Rita. It is wonderful to see you this morning. Thank you for your time. And
Thank
we're
you,
going to
Sarah.
be talking about the film David. And I want to kind of ask you, obviously, about the film. And then I'm going to turn the questions a little bit more to actually your role and what you did in the film.
Great.
But to start off, give a bit of background to everybody. I know that it was written and directed by Brent Dawes. It was co-directed by Phil Cunningham, and you are the producer or one of the producers, and you've been working on this film for about 11 years.
Yeah, it's been a real journey for us on the film, David. It's been a project that Phil actually had wanted to tell for 30 years. Phil owns the company as well as co-directing the project. So for 30 years, he's been really passionate about telling a story on the life of David. He finds David one of the most inspiring characters of all time. And just Phil has lived his life very courageously and fearlessly, having been inspired by the life of David, who just lives with this faith that makes him completely fearless, and his trust in God just makes him, believe he can slay giants, right?
But do you think, to begin with, you could give us your 60-second elevator pitch with the film's unique selling point?
Phil has long wanted to tell the story to inspire kids and adults alike, and just let them know, look, there is a God who has got your back, and you can dream big and go for it, because your future is secure and there is a plan. And so that is why we made the story of David, is to inspire future generations to live life expansively and courageously.
That's fantastic. And I think it is definitely going to appeal to a wide audience, and particularly those that have got that younger age. I can see behind you that you're really helping to encourage, those all ages. Maybe I'll ask you that at the end if we have time. But
sure.
I found very interestingly that the story is less about, most people think David and Goliath, and it's less about Goliath. And we actually see much more of David's mother. Is it Nitsavet?
Yeah.
In the film, and we just see a proportion of David's life. What is the purpose for that?
So the story of David in the Bible is a really long one, and also a lot of it is not very family friendly content wise. And so for us, we really wanted to make this film for as broad an audience as possible. And so when we started writing the script, we kind of did this timeline of David's whole life, from when he was born to when he died. And we really looked at it closely with scriptures, listed in the Bible, like where do we find this and this? And we thought, for a family audience and for a wide audience, not only believers, which section of this film is going to be the most appealing to a contemporary audience and also the most family friendly? And we landed on shepherd boy to king. And so that's why we chose that section of his life, is we were like, this is going to be, and Goliath is just a part of that, right? It's a tiny part of it is Goliath. But there is so much that happened, prior to Goliath and up until he became king. So to not make the film too long, we thought Shepherd Boy to King is the perfect chunk of story to tell. So that's why we did what we did.
And why include David's mother? We don't really read a lot about his mother in the Bible,
yes,
but she's quite a key feature in this film.
Yeah, so a lot of us who work at the studio are mums. You can see my children's art represented behind me. And Phil's wife, Jackie, runs the studio with him, and she's an incredible mum. And Phil had also a really amazing relationship with his mum. So Phil is this very courageous and inspiring character, and he attributes a lot of that to the way that his mum raised him. And you'll see at the end of the film, there's a dedication to mums around the world and mums, for instilling this courage in us. So it's very much an ode to mothers, actually. And David's mum had this amazing faith, and so it was just a way of honoring mums, right? Often unsung heroes, and so we just really wanted to honor mothers through the making of this project. And Phil in particular wanted to, do this dedication to his mum and the way that she raised him with this faith, and to live this life of courage. Phil always tells the story of when him and his brothers were teenagers, and they were like at home, doing something in the garden or whatever. And she came and she was like, "Hey, boys, get out of here. Go go on an adventure, go swim with crocodiles or something, because not quite that, but she was like, go do something. When David was your age, he was killing Goliath, and you guys are just sitting around the house. So she was this like really fearless, beautiful, larger than life character who just inspired this courage and this belief in God in them, and it's changed their lives, and it's changed lives of, the 450 people who worked on the David film, and then everyone who's watched it as well. And so we just really felt also it was a beautiful love story, David and his mum, the way that he, their relationship through the film was beautiful. She inspires him so much. And so we really just wanted to honor mums and it was just a really good way to show, the handing down of the faith, and I love the song Why God, where David is just like, why God, I don't understand what's going on. What am I supposed to do? And she's just like, my God, she just was so steadfast in her faith. She just had this unwavering faith and belief in God and his plans, and then at the end of the song, David turns from why God to my God, and so it was just this way of, saying to people like, mums are amazing. They're praying for you, and we honor them, Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And the fact that it just reminds me, as you were speaking, I interviewed for King and Country with Unsung Hero. They're celebrating their mother. And I was also speaking in Central Hall in London last week and reminded everyone about the fact that Charles Wesley's mother, Susanna, prayed for him faithfully, and the impact of the mother behind the scenes, as it were.
Totally.
And I think that kind of slots quite nicely. I was going to talk about the songs, but we'll perhaps double back to that in a moment. But this slots quite nicely into the fact about your mother or your parents. Now, I read that you've been very much shaped by your parents. They were journalists, and that actually relates, or can you tell us, how does that relate to David?
Yeah, interesting. So my parents as well. I mean, they're incredible, and I'm so lucky to still have them in my life. And they're very involved with us and our kids, and just still play a huge role in our lives. But also attribute like me having faith to them, right? So from a very young age, we were raised in the church, and my mom is such a prayer warrior. Like my little girl is 5, and she'll come home from having spent the day with my mom, like quoting scripture and like little prayer warrior, and I'm like, where did you learn that? And she's like, oh, Granny told me or whatever. So it's really incredible. And my parents, being journalists, always were also very fearless. My dad was doing frontline stuff as well. And I remember being in high school and them taking us out of school, be like, come, we're going to Germany or whatever, mum's on assignment. And, they just lived lives of courage as well. And also just inspired us to like, none of me and my brothers have very conventional careers, because my parents were very much like, you can do whatever you dream, whatever you're passionate about, whatever you want, So just really, really inspiring people and fearless, and also very much, they like justice, So my dad is like, I'm a journalist because people need to know what's going on, like, and I will write the truth no matter what, and he went through some stuff like, with his newspaper being bombed and sabotaged and all this stuff because he was exposing corruption and, and all this kind of stuff. So he's been through it, but he didn't back down, He was like, no. And he had a column in a newspaper called I Write As I Please. Like, I will write the truth, not what people tell me to write, And so really, really principled and kind of fighting for justice and righteousness. And that's been very inspiring to watch, all my life, really. And so, again, an ode to parents and to mums and to the people who go before us, really, and inspire us to live these lives of fearlessness, and trust. Yeah.
I think this film, should I say, is very much, you've aimed it as a psalmist film. David was a psalmist. He talks about that in the Bible, a singer, rather than seeing him as the king and the warrior. That's the kind of projection. I would say that's your USP, if you like, the direction of that film. And as you're speaking, you're reminding me of the song, which comes from Psalm 27. the Lord is my light, I will not fear, will not be afraid. And you're talking about standing up for what you believe, being confident, being bold. And I think that is going to speak to so many people, because it is very much, you know, in this day, it can be so intimidating. So many people are overwhelmed with fear. And actually, I think to encourage, and particularly children and young people, to say you can stand up. You can stand up and be confident and do the right thing and go for God and not be afraid. And I think I love that. But you had to oversee, what was it, 400 artists for all this, because it's animation, in 32 countries, working remotely. What did that look like for you?
You know, it's so funny because when we started the film, it was pre-COVID, right? And I remember doing like hiring interviews, and we had this big vision in like 2019 where we wanted everyone working on the film to be at our studio in Cape Town. And it was a non-negotiable for us. So I remember talking to people, be like, oh, it's such a pity, he was amazing, but he can't relocate for whatever reason. Sorry, no, you know, we want someone who can move. And we had like months of phone calls like this, like, oh, this person can't move. Okay, we'll go next, you know, on the list. And then literally then COVID happened. And so we were quickly like, and then it was like, okay, no one can move, no one can travel, no one can leave their homes. And we were like, okay, we quickly phoning people back and being like, okay, so we're actually fine with you working remotely, you know? And so it was such a pivot, and it was, you know, we completely went, you know, we were so determined to have this. We want, like, everyone must be in house, you know, we can all connect or whatever. And then we suddenly had to pivot to like, okay, well, no one is in house. Literally not a single one of us were at the studio in the beginning days, you know? And so we ended up having this team of, you know, as you said, over 400 people in over 30 countries around the world. And it worked amazingly. So huge credit to our tech team, because they had this monstrous job of, you know, syncing everybody, you know, and looking after everybody's software and programs literally around the world. And this incredible render farm at our studio running that. I mean, they did all-nighters and continue to, like, you know, they are absolutely the unsung heroes of this project, our tech team. And so, yeah, but it actually worked. And it was multiple time zones, which is kind of tricky. But, you know, we found the sweet spot at the end of the day, you know, with the guys in the States, and, you know, we had people in Europe, we had people in Japan, Australia. And so it was, yeah, navigating time zones was probably the trickiest thing. But in the end, we kind of, you know, you get it to work, right? They work on shots, you wake up, you approve, by the end of their day, they can submit shots. And so it worked out, and it was wonderful having people from so many diverse backgrounds working on the project as well. Everybody brings something, you know, and that was really special. We loved that, but it was just so funny how hard we had to pivot because of COVID, but it ended up being such a blessing because we got to work with such a diverse team.
Sounds amazing. Sounds very hectic. Can I just then ask in sort of closing? I know that you had so many singers. You had Lauren Daigle doing a very small part, playing Rebecca. You've got Phil Wickham, who's a very renowned Christian singer. And then you've got young David, who is actually a voice actor, but he also sings. Can you just kind of tell us a little bit of inside information about that process? Because you've got these you know, although they sing, they're not known for their singing. And then you've got these singers, bringing them into film where they've perhaps not acted before. And as much as they're not acting like actors, it's animated, there still has to be acting in their voice. They can't just be themselves.
Totally. It was such an interesting process for us. So Brandon is so actually, if you're familiar with the David demo, which was kind of the proof of concept we did in like 2017, it was a little short. We hired Brandon for that. And interestingly, that was his first audition and his first job. Was that short so many years ago, almost 10 years ago now. And he was just such a dream to work with. And he just so fit, you know, the personality and the character and you know, what we wanted for young David. And then fast forward like 5 years, we were doing the young David shorts. And we were like, there's no way he's going to sound the same. You know, it's been 5 years, and he was like in his 20s at the time. And we were like, you know, now he's probably, I think he was 22. We were like, well, now he'll be 27. He's not going to sound the same. And we auditioned and we just couldn't find the person with the right, you know. And so then we had him, then the casting director, Ned Lart, just said, I saw Brandon the other day. He sounds the same. Please just re-audition him for this. So we were like, okay, you know, what's it going to harm? So he re-auditioned and we were like, oh, he sounds exactly the same. Amazing. Let's use him. And then we were worried because he wasn't a singer, right? So we were like, let's just see because in the shorts there's 2 songs. So we were like, let's just try and see if it works. And we were like, look, are you up for singing? Do we need to get a stunt singer? He was like, no, I want to try. Let me, put me in, coach. Like, I'll give it a go. And he was amazing. And so then fast forward again to the film, and now he's like 30. We're like, he's not going to sound the same, And so, sure enough, he re-auditioned, and we were like, he still sounds the same, and he's got such a beautiful work ethic as well. He worked so hard at the songs, and yeah, he was amazing, and he actually just embodies young David, and he actually looks quite similar to the character as well. And he's just got this beautiful heart, this very enthusiastic personality. He works really hard, and he's just a really kind and lovely, passionate guy. And so it was really wonderful to work with him all the way through. And then Phil Wickham, so in talking to the guys at Angel Studios, they were like, what about getting like a worship leader? David was Israel's singer of songs, right? He was the original songwriter in the Bible. He was the guy, that was his job, like to sing songs. And so we were like, imagine if we were like, but like singers, can they act? Because it really is acting and performance, right? Especially when you can't see them physically. It's actually voice acting, they actually have to act. And we were like, but Phil's never acted. But then our casting director was like, let me just audition a whole bunch of worship leaders who are interested, and then we'll see. And so I think Phil's friend had mentioned to him, oh, and he was like, well, I'd love to do it. I'll give it a go. And me and Phil and Brent, we listened to these auditions. And when I heard Phil, I was like, oh my gosh, like he's actually perfect and he's amazing and he can act, And so I phoned Phil and Brent, we had a call, and I was like, look, I'm not going to tell you guys who my favorite was of the auditions, but you tell me who you thought nailed it. And at the same time, they were like, Phil Wickham. And so we were so happy about that. And then we kind of offered him, and he was so excited and so enthusiastic. And he just did such a great job. And he really brought the heart, and he was so kind and so passionate, and so humble throughout the whole thing. It was incredible. And so we did the dialogue separately, and then we had the song sessions. And he just worked really, really hard, at the dialogue. And he was just really humble and kind through all of it. And then obviously he nails the songs, he's just incredible. And similar with Lauren, like we heard her, and she was also just so passionate about it and so enthusiastic and so keen to get it right, and she was just beautiful and kind and really fun to work with. And, no one can sing like Lauren Daigle, right? She's just absolutely incredible. So yeah, it was really fun working with all 3 of them. I think the one thing I'll say about all, Brandon, Lauren, and Phil, all of them just so dreamy to work with, like just the kindest hearts and just the most incredible work ethics, like just so eager to get it right, took direction, there was zero ego at all from anybody.
That's so good to hear.
In any part of the process. And that's really particularly special to work with people like that. Yeah, it's great.
One word or one sentence to tell people what the film is so that they come and watch it.
Inspiring. Like we just, I think what we just really hope when people walk out of this film is that they feel inspired to live lives of courage and faith, and that they would go out and just feel hope when they walk out of the theatre for their lives. That's what we really hope.
That's fantastic, Rita. A real joy to speak to you. And I'm
Thank
really
you
encouraged
too.
to hear what other people think. There's been some creative license, but the heart of it, I think, of what you're explaining is so important that people go in and come out with that inspiration to stand
Amazing.
for truth, which
Yeah.
is Jesus.
Amen. Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Sarah. It was really lovely speaking to you.